Damn, son, where'd you find this? Let's go.
Welcome to the Life of Phys Podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Martin. Today's guest is someone who defies simple categorization, a true legend at the intersection of art, technology, activism, and culture. Since 2020, Sean Bonner has been deep in the digital and crypto art world, educating, advocating, and building both independently and as a venture partner with Japan's Web3 fund, gmjp. Sean leads the Web3 exploration for Obey Giant Art, and alongside DJ Muggs, co-created the virtual Lofi musician, Atari Lofi Punk. Sean's academics run deep, from research at MIT's Center for Civic Media and the Digital Currency Initiative, to his role as an associate professor at Keio University in Japan, where he worked with a blockchain research lab. Sean is the co-founder of the environmental open data nonprofit Safecast, which led to being a Shuttleworth Fellow, a now shuttered foundation that focused on open solutions to major world problems, and with whom he co-authored the book about the foundation's approach, 50 Shades of Green, Reimagining Philanthropy. Sean is a talented and published street photographer and experimental musician, releasing works under the monikers Drone War and Delay 5000. Previously, he co-founded the multimedia art and music collectives Cross My Heart, Hope to Die, and Saturday Night Massacre. He has also collaborated with Monochrome and the Soul Assassins. Sean also co-founded the educational outreach Coffee Common and the first hackerspace in Los Angeles. His photo books, Unfinished Projects, and Don't Go Outside collect various autobiographical and street photography images. He's been an artist in residence at the Museum Courtier in Vienna, a hacker in residence at Spark Fun in Colorado, and also an entrepreneur in residence at The Group in Los Angeles. In the 2000s, as co-founder of Bode Media Inc., Sean helped create MetBlogs, the first global network of local media sites. Prior to that, Sean helped build the hard-to-categorize gallery Six Space, exhibiting artists such as Glennie Friedman, Shepard Fairey, Space Invader. He also ran a record label releasing music by the likes of Hot Water Music, Integrity, and Less Than Jake. Sean has also designed things for Playboy, Victoria Records, Bad Brains, Die Antwood, Hatebreed, and countless others. And he'd like you to know, way before that, he was also a dishwasher. Now let's hear a word from our podcast sponsor and get to the show. The Life of Phys Podcast is lit by Harlow. Harlow is on a mission to empower creators to elevate their creativity with lighting kits made to last and built to inspire. These lights are bold, beautiful, and powerful because Harlow believes that your lights deserve to be seen. To learn more, follow them on Instagram at Harlow Creators or online at www.harlow.com. And don't forget to use our discount code Tyson10 to save 10% on your order.
Hi, I'm Sean Bonner, and I am currently based in Vancouver.
Well, Sean, thanks for coming on. Thanks for giving me the time, and we appreciate our mutual friend Taki Keio for introducing us at the coffee cameras and things.
Yeah, it's a very cool community that he's pulling together around coffee and cameras and things.
It was neat. I mean, I'd never been to one of those events, and I just happened to have that week off work. And he's like, "Man, you have to come. You have to come. Just come meet some of the creatives that are in town." And so we only have one car currently, so I had to arrange it with my wife to drop her off at work and shoot into Vancouver or into Burnaby there. But I'm very glad I did. You know, I feel like I've made some good connections with some great creatives in Vancouver. So what got you interested in art in the first place? How did you discover your love of art?
Yeah, so I was always, I guess, a very creative kid. I was always drawing and making things and just in my head, loving art class, being bored in other classes or whatever. So I think that from the very beginning, I was interested in, creativity in one way or another. I remember, I don't even know age, but early, 5, 6 years old, something like that. I remember figuring out how to copy sounds off of, the radio with a cassette tape so that I could listen to them again if I knew later without even not really comprehending that they were songs or something. I just knew I liked the way this sounded. And if I recorded it with this thing, then I could listen to that thing again. And so, I think I was really into just kind of people making stuff and what could I do from the very beginning. But I didn't ever, it was a very long time before I got comfortable maybe admitting that I was doing that myself. um, so I think like many people, it was really discovering punk rock and skateboarding that helped me see like, oh, there's a bunch of weirdos out there just doing their own thing, and that's okay, right? Because I think, my family and sort of world I was around, very, very traditional, and here's set career paths, and here's what people do with their lives, and my dad was a lawyer, and just sort of like various things like that, right? My mom ran a public relations agency. It's like very, here's what people do, and none of that was really interesting to me, and so it was like the summer between, I moved around a lot as a kid, so I time everything based on what grade I was in. I don't really remember the age exactly, but it was like sixth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade when some of my friends started skateboarding and were like giving me like a skate rock tape or like sliding me like a copy of Thrasher or something. And sort of that seventh grade into eighth grade really transition of finding bands and magazines and like, oh, there's a whole world here, reading lyrics and all of this stuff and being like, oh, it's okay, like I don't have to do this thing that everybody else around me is doing that doesn't feel interesting in any way. Like there's people being creative and painting weird stuff and crazy photos, whatever it was, right? And so it was like cutting out pictures of Thrasher, hanging up record covers, like all of that really for me was like, okay, there's another avenue. And I can sort of chase this. And so when I got into high school and you know met a few other people who were into that kind of stuff, which was the first time I had, because I had been going to private schools, or I got kicked out of like a school run by monks a year before. It was just like, it was a very weird thing. I was like into this stuff that I didn't know another single person who was into, and so it was like high school. It's like somebody spotted a t-shirt, right, and was like, hey, you know who that is, like, let's hang out. And
It's crazy how that happens, eh?
yeah. And like, I mean, as a separate thing, I almost feel sad about the loss of that to some extent. I mean, I know it exists like in, much, much, much more niche things at this point, but for the most part, there's such a widespread acceptance of old punk rock t-shirts and old skateboard t-shirts, or like whatever. It's just like you could just see them anywhere all the time, and it doesn't necessarily mean that those people know anything about it other than like, oh yeah, it's like a cultural, kind of a cool trendy thing or something, whereas before, you spot somebody with a Thrasher t-shirt, you knew everything about them, and it was like, this is a friend. I can run over.
That's what happened to me when I moved to Canada so I moved here in December of 89.
Yeah.
From Portland, Oregon. So I moved right at Christmas break. So I had nowhere to go, but I'd been coming here my whole life because my mom was from here. So what did I do? I got here, and I had like 3 weeks before I would start school in the new semester. I went to the Richmond Skate Ranch every single day. So I started meeting all these people that lived in different parts of the Lower Mainland and created this friend group there. But then come January, when I'm walking into this new school in a new country, you're 6'2", 185 pounds, and everybody else is like 5 foot nothing. Nobody wants to approach you. No one wants to talk to you. You know what it's like being a teenager, and you're like, yeah, I don't know what to do. Like, yeah. And then I walk in, I'm wearing a Ray Barbie Sockman shirt. And my friend Owen, rest in peace, my friend, he passed away 2 years ago on Christmas Eve. He walks up to me and he's like, do you skate? I'm like, yeah, a little bit. And I mean, it's been my whole life at that point for 10 years. And he goes, well, we meet me here after school and we're going to go to the blast ramp. And I was like, oh, you guys have a blast ramp. This is awesome, because I loved ramps at that point. So we met up, and then, man, we were inseparable for many years. So we became adults, and I had kids young and got married young and did all the things that all the smart people decided not to do. But yeah, it's neat how that connection. And I mean, Thrasher magazine in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
If you knew Thrasher magazine and you saw someone else with a Thrasher magazine, you were instantly friends.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like now where you can walk into the mall and buy a Thrasher hoodie at some shop, right?
Oh yeah.
Like,
I mean, there's kids in the neighborhood, that walk around with Thrasher t-shirts that don't know it's a magazine. It's like it's just a thing, right? But yeah, I mean, I had, I'm talking late 80s, early 90s is when I was in high school, and I had just moved to Florida a few years before, or not a few years before, the year before or something, and yeah, didn't, new school, knew everything, didn't know anybody. And, the opposite of you, I was like a smaller kind of fat kid, and, really nervous, and didn't know anybody. And so, when there were these people who, like, at least in my eyes, like, oh, like these people are cool, were like, oh, hey, cool t-shirt, welcome, you just move here, it was like instantly welcoming. It was like, wow, this is a whole different thing. I found my world. And those next few years were incredibly important to me. Going to punk shows, I started a label and put out, a compilation of a bunch of my friends' bands, like that world of all of these crazy different people. There was no like, what kind of person is at this? Like, there's no way to peg that. Every color, every size, every age, everything you can imagine, all lumped into this room, that fits like 25 people, and losing your minds. And it was just like, this is what it's all about. And that was really powerful for me. And so when I when I looked at, like, what is my future at that point, it was like, it's music, and this is everything for me. And so I started working with bands, and for a little while I went to college, and I was like wrestling between school and the label that I was trying to run, and eventually the label went out, so I dropped out of school, and I was like, at the time I thought it was genius. It turned out not to be the wisest thing in the world, but I realized I could take student loans out, and then rather than spending them on school, I could put out records with them. Which, if I had been like a really good businessman, might have made sense, but I was also very DIY at that point. So I was like, if this only costs $1 to make, I should, like, it's unethical for me to sell it for more than $1.05 or something,
the wise business
Exactly.
ethics of a young man's mind.
I know, exactly, right. So that took a long time to recover from. But I put out records by friends, and in the process of putting out those records, someone needed to design the record, and so I had a friend with a copy machine, or whatever it was. I knew somebody that worked at Kinko's, so we could go spend overnight there and use all the machines for free, whatever it was. It was just by nature of that, I was coming from a place of, like, I like making stuff and I'm kind of creative, just accidentally, to this necessity piece of, well, somebody has to do it, so I might as well go and do it. And I enjoyed doing it, but I never thought of, like, oh, I'm a record designer. It was just like, I'm doing it because it has to get done. And then that flipped to, I'm doing it because it's a job. I got hired as the creative director at Victory Records in the mid 90s, because I knew how to do it, because I knew Tony, who ran the label. He had, helped distribute a couple of my records beforehand. And I was talking to him, and I was like, I'm, thinking of moving out of Florida. And he was like, well, if you move to Chicago, you can have a job at Victory. I need a designer. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I moved to Chicago to like design a record at Victory. And then that turned into you're the creative director at the label, you know? And so all of that was like it was a sort of I'm chasing this dream of doing music stuff, and I have to do creative things in the process of it, you know? And so that was when I started taking pictures only because I needed a picture for a thing, you know? And so I knew photographers, and I was following photographers at that point. You know, I had photography books by people. I had, you know, again, posters and, you know, other things, but I didn't put myself in that same world as those people. Those people were artists, right? They were like doing this amazing stuff. I was just like a fanboy, you know. I was just copying their stuff or something along those lines. And it was during those years that I met Shepard Fairey, actually. And I met him just because I ordered some prints, some prints that was selling in the back of Maxim Rock and Roll or something. And he wrote a letter because he was, you know, still kind of doing everything by hand, just himself out of his garage at that point. He wrote me a letter back, and recognized my name because I had designed a record that he liked.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it was like this very powerful moment of like I finally have a job where I'm making enough money to buy a piece of art from an artist that I really like. And the very first interaction I have with them is that they already knew who I was and liked my stuff. And it was like, whoa, what just happened here? You know? Um, and so I kind of, you know, did the music thing for a while and kind of got burned out on the business aspect of music, but really loved the art aspect of it, and kind of transitioned into doing an art gallery. And a lot of the artists that I started working with were artists that I had worked with previously in the music stuff. They had done record covers, or, you know, most notably is Glenn Friedman, who I had gotten in touch with and to do a Bad Brains cover that we put out at Victory. And so when we started doing the gallery, I was like, you know, could we do an exhibition of some of the work from you know? So he was actually the very first exhibition that I ever did
That's
at
super
the
cool.
at the very first gallery. And you know, again, so these are like heroes of mine, right? That I'm like lucky enough to get to spend a few moments with at one time, who then, you know, through whatever twist of anything, like became really good friends, you know, and really important people in my life for, you know, any number of different reasons. And they were kind of all encouraging me along the way, you know, like I like just, you know, oops, hold on a second, sorry. The,
Anyway, what I just want to make sure, if some people may not know Shepard Fairey, he's
okay,
Obey. Uh,
the Obey Giant.
amazing work. And Glenn Friedman, if you were around skateboarding or punk or rap in the 80s, Glenn Friedman was the man.
Yeah,
Glenn Freeman, J. Grant Britton, they're on my list of people that I have to have on this show at some point, because that's my childhood. And like, they'll post photos and I will remember the photo to the point I remember the cover of the magazine that photo was in.
yeah,
So in case people don't know those names, Shepard Fairey, Glenn Friedman are huge in their respective fields. So that is absolutely incredible that you got to work with them on that level.
yeah.
And then I saw recently you posted a birthday wish or something to Glenn Friedman on your social medias. So that's super neat that you're still, all these years
Yeah,
later, you're still in contact.
Glenn's probably one of my closest and longest friends ever, which, you know, it's funny because he so I you know, there was this point when his first book came out, Fuck You Heroes, and a friend of this was like kind of mid 90s, and a friend of mine gave me the book, like had just gotten it, was like, you got to see this. And I remember flipping through the book, and my mind was just blown because I knew so many of those photos, but I had never known that the same person took all of them. you know? And so, again, just from like, again, magazine ads, like record covers, like all of these things, like these images shaped, so much of like my vision of what this world was and what it could be and who these people were, right? And so seeing like, oh wow, this same guy took all of these pictures. This is just unbelievable. And so when I was at Victory and when when we got this Bad Brains record that we were going to put out, um, immediately my first thing was like, our only option is we have to have a Glenn Friedman picture for the cover. And that was a big battle there because they didn't like to spend money on anything, and they always trying to get stuff for free or whatever. And I was like, no, we have to find this guy, and we have to get a photo. We have to pay for images from him. And I reached out to Discord, and they put me in touch, and it was a whole long story, but it was like everybody at the time was like, ooh, be careful reaching out to Glenn. He's kind of an asshole. You're gonna, this is, you don't know what you're in for knocking on his door. And I was like, oh, I was like so nervous. And so I left a message while we were doing. I pinged him at some point, and then at one day I was like working late at the office, kind of 2 a.m. or something. I just used to stay there all night long and work on stuff, and my phone rings at like 2 a.m. one day, and I like answer it, and he's like, hello. I'm like, hi. And he's like, who's this? And I'm like, it's Sean. Call my office. And he's like, oh, this is Glenn Friedman. What are you doing at the office at 2 a.m.? And I was like, I'm working. And he's like, oh, well, I was going to call and leave you a message and say I wasn't interested, but if you're working at 2 a.m., then I must have gotten some bad information. Let's talk. So it was complete, like, could have gone the complete other way.
Wow.
And so, then, anyway, we clicked and we got along really well. And, I was lucky enough that he appreciated my, artistic contributions to things. And, we clicked politically on a lot of stuff. And it was really a great conversation. And we've become really, really good friends. And I just got his brand new Bad Brains record, Fearless Vampire Killers, which just came out like a week ago. So this
Nice.
is incredibly exciting. It's every Bad Brains picture that he ever took. Um,
I'll have to look into
all
that one.
all in that. Yeah, just came out. It's fantastic. But yeah, so it was getting the chance to kind of work with these people who I thought were legends, and I don't know whether the world recognized were legends at that point. Certainly, they have now. But that those people, were encouraging to me, right? As opposed to being, um, snobby or dismissive or whatever else. Which, I don't know. Maybe in some other world or some other communities or things people are that way, right? But again, going back to the punk rock thing, going back to the skateboarding thing, where we're just a bunch of weirdos in this thing together, that that made all the difference for me and kind of encouraged me to keep trying stuff, And so did the gallery thing for a number of years and helped people with things until, at some point people were like, would you stop being like such an idiot about this? You're an artist. Like, you carry a camera around all the time. You're taking pictures of all of this stuff. Like, what do you mean you're not a photographer? Of course you're a photographer. Like, why are you being such a dumbass? you know? And so then there was finally like this point where I was like, okay, I guess I am. And then actually taking that step was pretty powerful. It's like, oh, okay, now that I've admitted that to myself, I can also recognize why I was so afraid to admit it before. Like if I say I'm an artist and then somebody doesn't like my stuff, then like that's like personal, right? And then I feel bad about it and everything. And so if I never ever ever say I'm an artist, then it doesn't matter whether anybody likes it, right?
That's
Because
very
who
true.
cares? Who cares? It's just a thing, right? And so it was like this emotional protection that I was building to insulate against, whatever might happen. And so like there was like this vulnerability piece of saying like, okay, I recognize that I am I'm an artist and I am trying to like create art in this. And if you don't like it, that's fine. Like my creation process and what I'm trying to do doesn't depend on your reaction in any way, right? That was a really hard step um, for me to kind of work through. um, but I think it was good. And so yeah, then I got to this point where I was just like, okay, I'm a photographer. I'm carrying a camera around all the time. I'm gonna consciously do this. I'm gonna try to figure out what is the world that I'm trying to create with this imagery. What is it? What's different? Like I have all of these photographers that I love. What am I doing that's different than them, right? Because I don't want to just copy people. So what am I trying to bring to this, in some way, or what story am I trying to tell visually in some way? And again, coming from sort of the music thing, everybody else around me in so many ways had a much more direct way to tell their story, right? I'm going to write lyrics about the thing that I care about, and you're going to get that right away. So there's no translation issue, right? But for me, I was like, I'm sort of feeling, I don't know, loneliness, isolation, like these kinds of things. Like, how do I express that in imagery, right? Like, what kind of pictures can I take that sort of paints this vision of a world, tries to capture this moment, or, is evocative in some way that somebody might look at this picture and feel something. Um, because that's what I realized. I realized that I'm looking at things and it's not just like, oh, what a great composition. I mean, that's cool, right? But the stuff that I was attracted to, like I felt something, and like, I don't know if I felt the same thing that they felt taking it. I don't even know if that's important, right? But I felt something like it. I had a reaction to it, and that's sort of what I wanted to, um, as a result, somehow create something that people would have some sort of a reaction to. Maybe it would be what I was trying to convey, but if it wasn't, that was fine too.
And that's where personal expression is. And that's why it's such a big part of art, is because I just, yesterday in my conversation, there was, he mentioned how he tries to keep his ego at bay, right? Because we all get that following. We get people like, oh man, that work is so good. And it goes right to our head. That's just us as artists, right? We're like, yeah, oh, this is it. This is it. And I don't know about you, but I tell myself the story in my head, like, okay, I'm here. I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this. We're going to keep growing. Boom. We're branching off of that. And then nothing happens. It falls flat. And then I beat myself up for the next 2 months that I did something wrong. But in reality, we need to create for our art. That's the most important, is create for you, create what you need to create that makes you feel good. And then, like they say, the right group of people will find you.
Yeah.
And then you'll continue to build, and you can pretty much chase anything and make anything happen as long as you're willing to accept the ups and downs of the journey, right?
Yeah, I've had this crazy experience a few different times in my life where, something that I spent half a second on in passing, thought it was fun in the moment, whatever, blows up and people love it and it goes all over the place and I still hear about it years later. And then things that I spent months on and years on, like, oh, I'm so like, this is so important, like crickets, and so I really like had to find a way to separate the reaction in the world from the creation, and just like, I'm just going to do this stuff and something's going to work and something's not going to work, but I'm not doing it for it to work. I'm doing it because I have to do it, and that was, that's hard to figure out on your own, but it's also hard to figure out, or explain to other people who maybe don't necessarily, get it, right? Like, well, why are you doing that if you're not going to get this reaction? Like, what metric are you looking for, or whatever, right? And it's just
algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, what's your ROI on the time that you're spending on this thing, and so it really is just like, okay, I just have to sort of keep going in this direction, even if that direction is very windy and touches lots of different things and it isn't like a clear, arrow shot towards something. but it's like, this is the interesting place, and I have to kind of go that way and find that path.
Yeah. And I mean, your photography is taking you many places. You know, you worked with major brands, artists, you have books out. How did all of that come about? Was that just keep pushing, nose to the grindstone, creating what you love to create, and finally it just happened? Because I know people always wonder, especially in the photography space, well, how do I get camera A or camera B? How do I get that brand to give me stuff? The old give me stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, like, what kind of advice can you offer the people that are really looking to make photography their future? That's what they're set. They love creating, but they want to work with artists and brands and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never worked as a professional photographer in like that context. So I don't have super expertise on that. My creative work was really, like creative director. I'm doing a billion different things, and photography is a piece of it in one way. But I think that, and I'm a bit older, so what works now and what works when I was younger are two different things, but like there was a time when people didn't know how to do this stuff. So just the fact that anybody was doing it was a huge you know? And so for me, that was the thing, was I'm just going to go do stuff. And then I don't have to explain to somebody later on that I know how to do it, because they can see that I've done it, and that was even in early internet tech jobs and things that I found my way into one way or another. It was just because I was doing stuff with punk rock bands and things online, in the early days of the web. I was hanging out on IRC and trying to help people book tours or whatever it was, just figuring out how this stuff can work for us and just doing it to do it. And so I think that's that's a thing, is like, just go do the thing. And that ends up opening doors, right? If you're waiting for a door to open to do it, then that is more. I mean, there's so many people trying to do things, and so I think that's really, really the issue, is like, if this is the thing that you're into, just go do it, and don't worry about gear or whatever. Like, you can take the best picture in the world on nothing. Like, one of my most famous photographs ever was taken with an iPhone 3, like in a subway. It was just like, there was a thing happening and I pulled out my phone and took the picture because I needed to take a picture of it. So it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, you can have Leicas and you can have, like, whatever, you can do all this stuff, and that's great. And I'm not knocking that, but in any way, I love that. But you don't need that to do the work. You can do the work with nothing. And so you can go, buy a shitty disposable camera tomorrow and take the best picture in the world with it, if that's what you want to do. And so I think that if you're trying to do photography stuff, just do it. And then figure out those next pieces. Like, all of my books I put out myself. Like, I never had a publisher, and not that I couldn't. I probably could. And I know publishers, I know people that do that stuff. So I could probably go knock on those doors and say, "Hey, I'd love to do this project," which is, I think, what real photographers do, and people who have actually published books and who know what they're doing, is, they do that, right? But I think, like, I still have that sort of insecure aspect of it, where it's like, if I just do it myself, there's no chance of any rejection along the way. There's no chance of somebody telling me it needs to be done in different. There's nothing, right? And maybe I won't sell as many of them, or it won't be in bookstores or whatever. But I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it the way I want to make it, and it's available. And so if somebody, knows me and wants the thing, they can get it, right? And so that connects all the dots that I'm most interested in. And if years down the line that's more important, great. If it isn't, I still did the thing, kind of. And so I think, you can do all of that stuff now so easy. It was so much harder to do before. And so I think that, you know, if you're a photographer and you have a body of work, you can make a book for it and have, hardcover production of books sitting on your desk next week, do it, like it doesn't have to be the best thing in the world. Just make a book, and then you can make another book, and then you can use those same pictures and make a better book if you feel like it, um, but just like holding that thing in your hand, doing it is a powerful personal step, kind of. So that would be my advice for anybody, is to just, like, there's no reason not to do stuff now,
Yeah.
It's so easy. It's so easy. Yeah.
I like when you're talking about how you just wanted to do it yourself and you had, worry, I don't have to worry about rejection, things like that. But in reality, if you think about doing it yourself and you go back to the late 80s to the mid 90s in the punk scene, skateboard scene, it was all grassroots. We were all doing everything ourselves.
Yeah.
You were at the Kinko's and you were laying different things down on the photocopier and you were making that collage to photocopy to see how it would look.
Yep.
The same principle applies. And
exactly.
I know I saw your when we were at the Coffee Cameras and Things, I saw your book Unfinished Projects.
Yeah.
Which is on my it's on my April list. I have to budget myself or I would be completely broke from photo books because I love them. Is that your most recent?
It's my most recent book. It's not necessarily my most recent work. It's a photo essay that I did a few years ago, and I found a new book manufacturer here in Canada, and so I was like, I want to test something with them. What can I do? And then I remembered I had this essay that I had done and was sort of very powerful for me. It's sort of like, again, if you think of what we talked about a little bit, kind of art as therapy and self-help in a lot of ways. That's what this was. This book contrasts two sort of major moments in my life, or events or whatever. My brother killed himself, and we had been, I don't want to say estranged, we just hadn't been in touch in a while. And we never had a terribly close relationship. So, it was a weird thing before that happened. It was a weirder thing after that happened, because, I went with my mom to go through his stuff and try to figure out who this guy was and what led him to that point, or what he was thinking or whatever. And you think, like, oh, well, if I'm going to go through somebody's house after they've died, there's going to be answers there. But, there weren't. There were even more questions, and left even more confused than before that. Right. And then separately, a few years before that, there was this big earthquake in Japan, and I moved with my family to Japan because I started a nonprofit that was doing environmental monitoring and working with communities to try to help them understand what was happening around them, and fix what they could, and take next steps to putting their lives back together or whatever. So I had these two different bodies of work of these two disasters in a way, right? This sort of natural disaster, this personal disaster. And, in both ways, there's this sort of potential to them of, what was there before, what happened, where it was going, what's next for any of this. In Japan, in Fukushima, you have, these towns that were kind of abandoned, but at some point will be put back together. People will move back to them or whatever. In my brother's life, he's never coming back to this, right? But looking at his stuff, what was that potential that, at some point he was thinking this was going to turn into, whatever. He kind of like not collected, but like fixed up old cars, and, so he had like a garage full of stuff, right? Like, and so you're like looking at it, you're like, oh, what was he thinking with all of these things, right? Like, did he envision some future that never Anyway, it was just sort of playing with this potential that kind of got caught in time and contrasting these two images from this. And it was really, for me, it was therapy, right? It was like I'm wrestling with this chaos of these events and all of this together, and making a piece of art with it feels like I've done something, and that's like coping in some way and figuring out, like, working through it. And so I did that as an online photo essay a few years before. And I feel like the images are very powerful. And so I was just, when I found this new book publisher, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put this together and see what it looks like holding it, because it's one thing you're scrolling past JPEGs, but like, you have a book, you hold the book. It's a very different feel, and I wanted to kind of capture that way.
First, I'm sorry for the loss of your brother.
Oh, I mean, like I said, it's a thing because we weren't that close, right? So, like, it's not like my best friend who I was in touch with all the time, but at the same time, it's somebody that I grew up with, right? So it's like, it's a very mixed, confusing, of course it's terribly sad, but like, it's not sad in the way that everybody expects it to be sad, right? And that's a huge piece of it too, because it's like, how do I reconcile how I feel about this when I don't even know how I feel about it, and I don't feel the way everybody thinks I should feel, and I don't feel the way I think I should feel. And how do I, like, it's just, I recognize how other people around me are feeling, like, it's a very, navigating that is not a
Oh, I can imagine.
yeah.
2017, we're coming up here real close. My ex-wife overdosed on fentanyl.
Oh.
We had been apart for 10 years. I'd raised our 4 children myself.
Mm-hmm.
Still
it was the same year for,
yeah,
I mean, that was,
okay.
Yeah.
So still cared about her well-being. I'd helped her out of situations at least once a year for those 10 years. And just not knowing how to feel when she was in a coma for 6 months. So trying to figure out what to feel when she passed.
Yeah.
Because
I'm sorry.
You have good memories. She blessed me with my children, but you also have all these bad memories in history that you remember. And then my creative outlook came on after that. So right before COVID is when I really dove deep into photography. Mm-hmm. And that's where the Phys name comes from. So Phys stands for Photography Heals Your Soul. And
I was wondering, I knew that I figured there had to be a story behind it.
Well, the original story was it started as a fixed gear bicycle brand, and it was pedal harder, you sissy. That one of my best friends in the world, still to this day, we wanted to do something. We were young, had no money, it wasn't going to go anywhere. But that name meant something. The Phys name meant something to us. So when I was thinking of a podcast, I was throwing up different ideas for names. And I was like, I have to use it, but I have to figure out a connection. It has to mean something. And I just started talking through the 4 letters, and it came to me, and I'm like, you know what? Photography is my therapy. So
yeah,
this is perfect. And I credit COVID and being off work and being able to wander for hours and hours every day with my camera for my rapid abilities with a camera now, right? Because I had 3 months of open. My wife's a teacher. My current wife's a teacher. So she's on online courses. My kids have online school. I didn't have anything to do. Mm-hmm. I built IKEA closets, re-drywalled the bathroom, like
yeah.
All of this stuff you could get delivered to your house. But then when I really started looking, it was around the time of the release of the Fujifilm X-T3. I got that camera and my whole mind was blown. And then I started learning about the history of photography, like the legends, the Fred Herzogs, the Sal Eitners, the, Vivian Myers. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And, we're 6 years later.
Yeah.
I'm here talking to like incredible artists on this platform. And it's amazing what happens when we don't quit.
Yeah.
when we don't give up, and there's plenty of times I wanted to quit. I wanted to drop my kids off with my ex-wife and be like, I just can't survive anymore. But I never
Yeah.
did. And you learn so much about yourself through those moments. So I'm very excited to pick up that book and have it as part of my collection. Now knowing more of the personal story and so now I can open it. Like I looked at it at the event and I was like, this is super cool. And I love the title because that's me in a nutshell. I have like 87 projects going and none of them are finished. But, I just want people to see like, you're sharing a part of your life and a story that, that yes, it was your brother, but you're conflicted because you weren't close. You weren't talking all the time. It's not like you were like the same town and you could go visit anytime, but you just didn't. It's one of those moments where it allows people listening to know that these things happen in life. We go our separate ways, we separate as family. And then you have that confliction when you're trying to figure out the story and you're trying to put the pieces of that puzzle back together.
Yeah, and with the book contrasting those things, like I'm playing a little bit, and I know what I'm putting into it. I don't know what anybody takes out of it, right? But
Yep.
like, like I'm exploring a little bit of the fact that here's this family member that I should be super, super, super invested emotionally in, but there's all of these conflicts with that, right? But then here is this, sort of town on the other side of the world that I'm in no way ever going to like fit into, that I have a deeper emotional connection to because, I packed up my whole family. We moved around the world to like spend years there trying to help, right? And so it's like this connection to a thing that I can't ever really be connected to, and not a connection to a thing that I should have a connection to. And the title Unfinished Projects, right, plays into that piece I was discussing about this sort of potential of like, what could have happened with any of them, and for whatever reason, didn't at this point. And because there's a million different routes that could have changed along the way for that, and could have gone any number of different ways, but this is where it ended up, right? And so yeah, now that you know that, it'll be interesting to hear from you when you see it, when you look at the pictures again and see, if any of that comes through.
It's just having that background now. So now when I look at it, I know kind of your thought process and what you were trying to accomplish. And now it's going to add more to the images. It's going to add more to the story as I'm putting it together because we've had this chance to talk and you've explained kind of your thought process behind it. Another part of the show, Sean, is every time I have someone on, as someone who credits photography as a big part of their healing process.
Yeah.
This show is a main reason that I finally, at 49 years old, talked to a therapist for the first time about my childhood traumas. And I always like to have a segment where I can hear how your creativity affects your mental health, how important that aspect of your life is to what you do and how you portray yourself every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think my creativity has always been my own therapy with that, for sure. I whether it's writing or music or photography, it's me doing my thing without relying on other people for it, and just start to finish 100% is in my hands, is something that I can do. Like, I feel like I have undiagnosed ADHD. I have, super crazy, childhood chaos, family stuff all over the place, all kinds of things, and at many different times I have issues where I was relying on someone and that blew up and fell apart, and was just disastrous in any number of ways. And the only way I got through that was, what's the thing I can just do myself, start to finish, and do it, And so creativity has always been that for me. I used to write a lot, and I always was writing about how just that act of like writing and trying to put thoughts together on that helped me work my way through that stuff, and that transitioned into photography in a lot of ways, like just going and creating a vision and making it, like I've done something, like this thing didn't exist and I made it exist, and like, okay, I'm capable. All right, right. And so I think that that's always been it, like it's always been finding a way to get through stuff. And I mean, like I said, that book is a perfect example of like I'm wrestling with all of this stuff and I don't quite understand how I'm feeling about it or how I should feel about it or whatever, and trying to make something with it, put it out into the world, is a process to get through that, and it feels like accomplishing and is successful in sort of getting through it. Again, successful to myself, right? Because that successful is such a loaded word, I think, in so many ways, because who are you to, who is it successful to, right? Everybody has a different idea of what success is. And you'll never be successful, in everybody else's eyes, in all of their other things, and chasing that is like an absolute guaranteed loss, right? So come up with what you think is successful and then do that thing that you want to do, and then it doesn't matter, right? And so that's always been my piece with this is, or I wouldn't say always, it's the thing that I was doing before I realized what I was doing. And then when I realized that that's what it was, and it was like a self-coping piece with it, then that, helped a lot.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's,
Yeah.
It's been interesting over I have 80 or 90 episodes recorded. How we all have that same connection. As somebody who's an artist and creates, and it's important that we create our own works, and how much that means to our life.
Mm-hmm.
Right now I've been on like a 2-month where I haven't shot a photo that I think about nothing. And that's just been, I'm still clicking the shutter, but I don't feel it. It's not what I want to be shooting right now. But I know that I have to have that motion. I have to feel that shutter click just to keep myself connected to the current, right? So
yeah,
it's just that roundabout circle, and how important creating really means to my life and my vision and what this podcast represents, and sharing that with other artists all around the world. And we all have that same meaning.
Yeah.
It's such a cool community feel.
I think, I think there's a little bit of a relation. A friend of mine, this fantastic photographer, who lives in New York, Clayton Cubitt. I don't know if you know him, but
I do not.
He's well worth looking into. He's fantastic. He has this thing where he is talking about photographers, getting paid and as a job, and he says that like, when you hire me to take pictures of something, you're not hiring me for, the 1 second it takes me to click the shutter. You're hiring me for the 30 years it took me to know when to click the shutter, And so I think that like what you're saying, like you're walking around, you're taking pictures, even like you just have to keep doing it, because that's part of your personal training and your refining, because like that sets you up for the one that you do want to take.
Yeah.
You can't just never ever do it and then do it one time and that's perfect. Like the only way that you get the perfect thing is by having a huge trail of imperfect things leading up to it, and it's being comfortable and okay with that, and embracing it in a way, right? 'Cause I do the same thing. I walk around and take pictures and I delete, or just archive whatever, and then occasionally there's, oh, okay, I got the thing that I wanted that time, or often didn't quite get it, but now I know how to do it differently next time I see that thing, that I need to do my angle differently. I need to, come at it from the other side, whatever it is, which hurts sometimes when it's like, you're never seeing that thing again, you missed it from just this piece, but that's also like instantly bakes in, like next time I know to take 3 steps that other way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's a great place for us to end it today. Where's the best place for people to interact and find you?
So I'm on everything as at Sean Bonner. Basically every site. How often I check any of them, is up and down all over the place. I'm not as much on Twitter these days, more on Blue Sky, still on Instagram for the moment. But SeanBonner.com or SeanBonner.photos are easy places to start following the trail, and they all end up in the same place one way or the other.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Sean. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been a blast. I look forward to connecting at the next event we can both attend.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, man, thank you so much. I'm going to look into Clayton Qubit. I have him pulled up on the other screen here.
Yeah, please do.
And yeah, man, enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, take care.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Life of Phys Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed our show, and don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you content and the stories of our incredible guests. And remember to stay connected with us on all social media platforms. It's at LIFE_OF_PHYS or on the internet at www.lifeofphys.com. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day.